Yo people, what's up? This is Malcolm Extreme, the content machine, coming at you with another reaction video. Today is from Serious History. I haven't watched any videos from this channel before, and the video we're going to be watching today is Most Epic Deaths in History. So I'm expecting a lot of crazy stuff in this one. But before we start, make sure you hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell for more notifications from the content machine, Malcolm Extreme. Let's get started.
Today, we're going over the most epic deaths in human history.
All right.
Number 1. Benkei. We're starting this video off with a story of the greatest wingman in human history.
All
It's
right.
a dark night in 12th century Japan.
I get the feeling we're gonna get a lot of like
streets of Kyoto. With an abundance of temples,
samurais
monks
in this
are a
one.
common sight, but this guy is different. At 6'6", he towers over everyone around him, and he's carrying a weapon.
Dang.
A cross between a sword and a long spear called a naginata. His face gives off the vibes of someone on a hunt more than someone seeking enlightenment.
Dude, can you imagine being in like Japan in this time period, seeing like this 6'6" monster, this freaking Yao Ming looking guy? I just chose out Yao Ming, but like with a spear just coming at you, man, that'd be crazy.
And it turns out he was out hunting that night for his final victim. See, Benkei was actually a Sohei, a warrior monk trained and battle-hardened in combat. Through his encounters with samurai, he's decided that they were an arrogant class, unworthy of their status in society. The world would be a better place with less of them around, and this led him on a bloody quest to duel and defeat 1,000 samurai, collecting their blades as trophies after each victory. At
Yo,
point,
that's like a video game quest, bro.
999 swords, and was out that night looking for his final duel.
Oh man.
While walking near Goto Tenjin Shrine, Benkei hears the sound of a flute, and when looking to see who is playing it, he finds a small, thin samurai. Around the man's waist is a beautiful gilded katana, the perfect piece to finalize Benkei's sword collection.
Man, is this samurai gonna be like freaking nuts, like with his skills and stuff?
Immediately challenges.
It's just his luck, right?
The small man puts away his flute, and surprisingly, he agrees to fight. The two men walk together to Gojo Bridge and draw their weapons. Full of confidence, Benkei rushes in, but despite towering over the samurai, Benkei is swiftly defeated.
Wow.
Instead of taking his life, the samurai just turns and walks away. Benkei is shocked and left in disbelief. In the following days,
dude, that's nuts, bro.
Feelings turn to anger and frustration. How could he lose to this tiny samurai?
Does he decide to kill everybody?
Larger men in the past. He decides to stalk the grounds of Kiyomizu-dera Temple, waiting for the samurai to appear so he could take his revenge. Eventually, the samurai does show up, and Benkei immediately challenges him to another duel, a fight that Benkei loses again.
Wow, man.
Humiliated, he bows in defeat and tells this samurai that he'll abandon his life as a monk and instead follow him as one of his retainers. The samurai, who turns out to be Minamoto no Yoshitsune of the legendary Minamoto clan, agrees.
This is so cool.
And the two become inseparable. They go on to join Yoshitsune's half-brothers and...
It actually reminds me like if this was anime in real life.
fight in the Genpei War against the powerful Taira, a clan that had killed Yoshitsune's father when he was just a baby. After 5 years of fighting, the Minamoto clan emerges victorious, and one of Yoshitsune's half-brothers, Yoritomo, becomes shogun. The end of the Genpei War had an unintended consequence. Without a common enemy, jealousy and suspicion soon turn the brothers against each other, and Yoshitsune and Benkei find themselves on the run, being pursued by Yoritomo and his men. They eventually find protection under another clan called the Fujiwara, and the pair spend a few years in relative peace.
Dude, this era must have been like so crazy.
A lot of pressure and
for like fighting and honor and stuff.
Convinces the Fujiwara to turn on his brother. Fujiwara no Hidehira, the man who was once their protector, betrays them, and on June 15th, 1189, at the Battle of Koromogawa, Yoshitsune and Benkei find themselves trapped and outnumbered 5-1, with 500 of Fujiwara's men surrounding.
Dude, I want a show of this.
The forces clash, and Yoshitsune's men put up a heroic effort.
Dude, I honestly wouldn't mind a show of this whole story, bro. Like, aside from this, like an actual biopic, it would be so freaking interesting, and like with all the sword fights and stuff, it'd be so cool.
Benkei in particular is a demon on the battlefield, crushing enemies who are on average more than shorter than him. But despite their best efforts, Yoshitsune's men quickly begin to fall. With just a handful of retainers remaining, Yoshitsune realizes the battle is already lost. He turns to Benkei and tells him he plans to commit seppuku within the castle. He'll need time to prepare, and Benkei understands the assignment. he walks to the bridge that serves as the only entrance to the castle and stands alone against Fujiwara's army. Fujiwara signals a charge, and wave after wave of his men charge Benkei. He
Dude.
cuts them down one after another. No man can make it past him. In some stories, he's said to have single-handedly slain 300 soldiers on that bridge.
Dude, this guy is like, this guy is just like Guts in real life. And his master is nothing like Griffith towards the end, but it's like Guts following Griffith almost.
Stoically behind a pile of deceased Fujiwara warriors, beckoning more men to cross. And despite orders to do so, none of the Fujiwara's men answer his call. They all know that stepping on the bridge was a dead out from a distance instead. The archers let loose a barrage of arrows that find their mark in Benkei's chest, but nothing happens. Benkei doesn't flinch. They let loose another volley of arrows.
Damn, bro, this guy was a machine,
Benkei's
bro.
a pincushion of arrows, but is still standing defiantly in their way. Time passes, and both sides stare at each other across the bridge. Nobody dares to make the first move. Finally, Fujiwara orders some of his men onto the bridge, and they reluctantly do as they're told. As they slowly approach Benkei, he makes no motion to ready himself.
Because he's dead.
Closer, and when they finally reach the massive monk, they discover that while he was still standing, he was already dead.
He died.
Benkei, knowing he needed to buy as much time for his master as possible, had positioned himself to be supported by his spear even if he was no longer alive. In his last stand, he showed no pain or emotion while being hit with countless arrows, all to give the illusion that he was ready to fight anyone who dared to cross.
Yo, this guy was a ride or
actions,
die.
Yoshitsune had enough time to commit the seppuku ritual properly, maintaining his honor. What a wingman!
See, that's the one thing I never understood about like seppuku. I was like I would always like why wouldn't as a samurai just fight to the death, you know? Just fight to the death. I think there's more honor in fighting to the death than ending your life. I don't know. Can anybody explain like what is the purpose of just as a warrior just killing yourself? I don't know. Let's move on to the next story. But like that guy was a ride or die. He was absolutely a ride or die. Damn.
Number 2, Yi-sun Shin. The end of the 16th century in Korea was a strange mix of insane political corruption and relative peace for its people. Korea was a loyal tribute state to China, and the Ming dynasty pretty much left them alone. To the east, the Japanese were busy killing each other in the Sengoku Jidai, so they weren't a problem either. Aside from those pesky Jurchens who were constantly invading from the north, the rest of Korea was pretty boring and uneventful with no major threats. The boring, no-wars way of life led to many men choosing to pursue careers as scholars and government officials, as it was now the best way to gain power.
This is the next best thing, really.
This led to a bloated and corrupt political class, and an extremely weak military led by generals who had never seen real combat. This combination of governmental corruption and a weak military would end up causing all kinds of problems in 1590 when Hideyoshi Toyotomi...
That's the weird thing. That's the one thing I've noticed. Like, throughout, like, China and, like, Japan, they always had the most interesting history. But when you get to Korea, it's like, it's just kind of bland.
Fulfilled the dreams of his former lord, Oda Nobunaga, and reunified Japan, bringing an end to the Sengoku Jidai. The Japanese, for the first time in over 100 years, were not at war with each other. And if they weren't busy fighting each other, who were
They're fighting something else. Yeah. Oh, yeah, China.
Oh. Hey, before you brutally invade Korea and stuff, can I ask you, how many spam emails or texts do you get a day? I think you need to check out Incogni. See, you can get back to your invasion now. Toyotomi begins sending messengers to Korea, saying that he was planning to conquer China and that he expects the Koreans to help him or else.
Oh, damn.
Remember, Korea was basically like the Puerto Rico of China in this era.
Yeah, can you imagine that if you just like had no choice? You could just get dragged into a freaking war.
So they couldn't really help Japan conquer it. Not like they wanted to anyway. They thought the Japanese were primitive barbarians. Plus, those idiots don't even know how to sail anyway, right?
Wrong. The Japanese were assholes.
In 1592, hundreds of Japanese ships are spotted off the coast of Busan.
Imperial colonizing asses.
Seeing the massive Japanese fleet, 2 of Korea's top admirals freak out and sink their own ships so they won't have to fight the Japanese. And just like that, half of Korea's naval fleet is gone.
Wow,
The
what a
Japanese
bunch of
soldiers landed
cowards.
Busan unopposed and immediately
What a bunch
began
of
conquering
cowards,
the fort
man. I would, if I was the leader or the king, I would executed them immediately if I found that shit out.
and cities on their march to Seoul. The Korean military is no match for Toyotomi's men, who were all veterans of a 100-year war. Korean casualties are huge. The Japanese are ruthless and leave few survivors. Within 3 weeks, they've marched to and conquered Seoul. A few weeks later, they take Pyongyang and are at China's doorstep. The fall of Korea seems inevitable.
Damn.
But when all hope seemed lost, a man determined to defend his homeland and drive out these barbarian invaders rose to the occasion. A man who quite possibly was the greatest admiral to ever live. His name was Yi Sun-shin. So Yi Sun-shin's story is pretty interesting because, unlike most heroes, he wasn't necessarily liked by the elites at the time. In fact, they kind of
I could imagine,
but for all the wrong reasons.
I could imagine. He probably had 10 times the testosterone rolling through his veins. Pumping through his veins, excuse me.
Basically, early in his military career, he was so good at inspiring his men and leading them to victory that he made everyone around him look bad by comparison. Remember, corruption was a big
Yeah, made them all look like
time.
babies.
So out of jealousy, a general falsely accuses Yi of deserting the army in battle, and the king believes it. He
Man, oh hell no.
Thrown in prison and tortured. This experience
hell
would
no.
probably make most men quit the military altogether, but Yi was eventually released, and he managed to climb his way back through the ranks to commanding a small fleet of ships by the start of the Japanese invasion.
Nice.
Now, despite the fact
but that would be so frustrating if you were wrongly accused, deranked, and then you just had to start all over from scratch. That'd be so frustrating. I kind of find it interesting that like for being accused of deserting, like he didn't get executed. That's actually interesting.
Trash at fighting at the start of this war, they did have one huge advantage over the Japanese. They'd been dealing with Woko pirates along the coast for years, and because of this, they had developed ships called Panoksun, and later the turtle ship that were specifically designed to combat Japanese naval tactics.
Nice.
See, the Japanese weren't used to fighting at sea, so they basically stuck to.
It's also crazy how much technology they had back then.
Their strategy consisted of
and
shooting
strategies
with rifles and boarding other ships, and engaging them with swords and spears. Their ships were more like transport vessels rather than battleships. The Panoksun, on the other hand, was a floating fortress.
Technology for that time, at least.
In a way that made boardings impossible. These ships were a huge reason why Admiral Yi was able to have so much of his success, and are basically the only advantage the Koreans have. And they already sank over half of them themselves.
Oh my god.
Admiral Yi was not a coward like the other two admirals, and instead of sinking his...
Those freaking cowards, bro. Like, they had the advantage, and they sunk their ships. Oh my god. I forgot. I like briefly forgot about that.
He rushed his fleet of 34 ships head first towards the Japanese and began attacking them along the coast.
Nice.
His capabilities as a naval commander are obvious right from the start. In just a few weeks, using tactics to bait the Japanese to sail into vulnerable positions, he single-handedly sinks over 200 Japanese ships with no losses of his own.
Damn, this guy is a menace, bro. Absolute menace.
Yet sails away victorious every single time. Yi is the sparkling piece of glitter embedded in the turd that is the Korean military. And by the end of the year, he had...
No, he's not the sparkling piece of glitter. He's literally the diamond within the sewage system, bro.
sunk 350 Japanese ships. Yi's efforts, along with the help of Chinese reinforcements, allowed the Koreans to drive the Japanese soldiers all the way back to Busan, and by the end of the year, the war entered somewhat of a stalemate, with the Chinese and Japanese trying to negotiate a peace deal. So things are going pretty good for Yi. But remember the two admirals who sunk their own ships at the beginning of the war? Well, one of them, named Won Gyeon, is insanely jealous of Yi's success. So jealous, he starts talking shit about Yi to the king every day. And when peace talks with China fail and Toyotomi begins a second invasion of Korea in 1597, Gyeon and other government officials frame Admiral Yi as a traitor.
Oh, hell no.
For the second time in his career, Yi is stripped of his rank.
Did he go to jail again?
He is brutally tortured again.
Oh my god, bro.
Has a change of heart, and he instead sends Yi back to...
Hell no, bro. As soon as the king releases me, I would... If Yi sticks with the army at this point, he's a better man than me, because at that point, I'd be so pissed. I would probably think about turning to the other side. And then coming back and whipping all their asses.
Fight as a common soldier, a humiliation worse than death. With Yi out of the picture, Won-gyeon is put in charge of the Korean fleet. And as you may have guessed by now, he was pretty terrible at his job.
Jesus.
He drank heavily, made poor decisions, and disrespected his men. Many of Yi's commanders refused to fight under such a downgrade. And what made things even worse for Gyeon was that during the stalemate, the Japanese who had watched Admiral Yi wreck their over and over again had actually learned how to fight at sea.
Yeah, that's the one thing about Japan. They
They
adapted.
began to use the same strategies Admiral Yi had used against them.
I give them
This
credit for
all
that.
comes
They
to a head in
adapted to the
Battle of
situation.
Cheolcheol-liang, Gyeon's first attempt to attack the Japanese fleet. With 200 ships and the best of Admiral Yi's men, Gyeon sails out to confront the Japanese, and he immediately falls into a trap. A trap they had learned from fighting against Yi. The entire
Wow.
Korean Navy is decimated, and Gyeon is last seen being chopped to bits by Japanese soldiers while trying to run away.
Yo, that's what he
King,
gets.
realizing
Karma's a bitch. He was a hater, and he got chopped a bit. That was karma.
he may have
I don't
messed up,
believe in karma,
reinstates
but
Yi Sun-shin as fleet
there you
admiral,
go.
and he takes command of the pathetic remains of the once undefeated Korean Navy. He's left with just 13 ships and a few hundred demoralized men. In the following battle, outnumbered 25-1, using superior strategy, Yi manages to sink 31 of the 333 Japanese ships, again
Nice.
without losing a single ship of his own. This victory
Nice.
gives Yi time to rebuild his navy, but
That's what we call the
things
comeback.
still look pretty grim for the Koreans. But the next year, Hideyoshi Toyotomi becomes ill and dies, his last official order being to withdraw the Japanese army from Korea back to Japan. Yi
Damn.
sees this as the time to finally drive the Japanese out of Korea for good and mounts a final offensive against the retreating Japanese forces. At the decisive Battle of Noryang, Yi takes his position at the top of his flagship with his son and nephew and begins beating a war drum to push
Dang,
allied
his son
Korean
and nephew
Chinese
were with
fleet forward.
him.
Admiral Yi's
That's
ship
crazy.
leads the charge, and he personally takes out
You know, I think it was common at that time. Like, if you had like family in the military, chances are you'll be fighting like right next to them in battle.
10 Japanese ships. The Japanese are in full retreat, and Yi beats his drum with intensity. Victory is within his grasp. After 7 long years, Korea will finally be free of these invaders. But
Damn.
suddenly, he's hit in his armpit by
Damn.
a Japanese musket ball. He realizes the wound is fatal, and he turns to his
Yo,
son
that was a
and
crack
says,
shot.
"The
Whoever
war
shot
is
that
at
was a
its height.
crack
Wear
shot."
my armor and beat my war drums. Do not announce my death." His son and nephew quickly carry his body below deck, and his nephew, dressed in Yi's armor, quickly returns to the
See, even in death, like he was thinking about the strategy and the plan going forward. This guy was a good leader. Holy crap.
admiral's position and resumes beating the drum. Yi's men continue to fight, and the Koreans drive the Japanese out of Korea for good.
Nice.
Undefeated in battle, Yi dies below deck, listening to the sound of his drum, knowing that his homeland was finally free. Number 3, Ben L. Salomon. So we generally
Oh,
cover
man.
stories from more ancient times on this channel, but this story from World War
I
II
might have heard of
will
this guy.
be
I might have
belongs
heard
on
of this guy.
list. This is the last stand of a dentist turned field medic. Who
Yeah, I
took
know
out
this
98
story.
Japanese
I know this
soldiers before
story.
falling
I've
for
heard
his
it
own
before.
wounds. Ben L. Salomon was drafted into the United States Army in 1940, just 3 years after he graduated from the USC Dental School. Salomon proved to be a model soldier and showed himself to be very skilled with both rifle and pistol. He was
Nice.
quickly promoted, first to lieutenant and then to captain in 1944, serving
Nice.
as a regimental dental officer of the 105th Infantry
They
Regiment.
put him as a regimental, a dental officer. But they made his character look like this. Why didn't they make his
Lieutenant
character
and
look
then
like that?
captain
Come
in
on.
1944, serving as a regimental dental officer of the 105th Infantry Regiment. In June of 1944, Salomon and the 105th were deployed into active combat in Saipan. The fighting in the Pacific was infamously bloody. Casualties on the island were extremely high, and with so many soldiers having much more pressing issues than a root canal, Salomon volunteered to replace the 2nd Battalion's field surgeon who had been wounded.
Nice.
By July, both
He's a
the Americans
versatile
and the Japanese
soldier.
had suffered heavy casualties, and the remaining Japanese troops on the island came to the realization that there was no path to victory. They decided on a final banzai charge, a mission with the sole goal of killing as many American soldiers as possible with no plan of returning.
Damn.
Early in the morning of July 7th, 1944, the
That
remaining
was the thing about the Japanese too. They were kamikaze themselves into like situations back then. Man, it's crazy. Like their military was absolutely nuts. They didn't give a damn as long as the enemy was defeated.
4,000 Japanese soldiers began their final attack. Salomon's field tent was positioned just 50 yards behind the front foxholes, and within minutes, his tent quickly filled with over 30 injured troops. He did his best to tend to the wounded, but the Japanese soon broke through the
Yeah,
front lines.
Japanese were
He looked out of his
relentless,
tent
bro.
and spotted a Japanese soldier bayoneting a wounded American who was lying outside of the tent. Enraged, Salomon picked up the rifle of one of his patients and fired at the Japanese soldier, killing him. Suddenly, 2 more Japanese soldiers popped into Salomon's tent and he fired on them, taking them out as well. Like zombies, 4 more enemy soldiers then
Dude, that's
crawled into the tent
crazy.
from the side,
Like
and
zombies,
Salomon
exactly
took 2
like
out with his rifle
zombies.
and another with his bayonet. He hit the 4th soldier in the stomach with the butt of his gun, and a wounded soldier he had been treating finished him off. Realizing the situation was only getting worse, Salomon instructed his medics to evacuate all of the wounded men. He would stay behind to give them cover so they could retreat.
He
Salomon grabbed a rifle
freaking
and
Rambo
aimed
on
forwards.
them.
When he saw 4 men manning a machine gun fall to enemy fire, he rushed to the gun and manned it himself, firing bursts into the charging Japanese soldiers.
Damn.
He
Yeah, I remember
continued
this.
to
I
fight from
remember
that
this
position
story.
until he was eventually overrun by enemy soldiers. Days later, when the Americans returned to the battlefield, Salomon's body was found slumped over the machine gun, with 98 dead Japanese soldiers piled in front of him. His
Damn.
body was ravaged with 76 bullet holes and many bayonet wounds, 24 of which he may have suffered before actually dying. The blood trail on the ground showed that Salomon had repositioned the machine gun multiple times while mortally wounded. Despite
Damn.
saving many lives that day,
That guy
Salomon
was
denied the Medal of
that
Honor
guy
due to
was
a rule in
unstoppable.
the Geneva Convention that no medical officer can bear arms against an enemy. Despite multiple recommendations from generals throughout the years, he remained a footnote in history until 2002, when Salomon was finally posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor from President
Yeah, that's
George
right.
W.
He got the Medal of Honor.
8 years later.
That was nuts. That was serious history. The most epic deaths in history. Man, those some nut stories. Absolutely nut stories, man. There's so many epic people out here on planet Earth. Yo, let me know if you watch this channel. Let me know what you think about the video. Comment, like, subscribe, hit the bell for more notifications from the content machine. Malcolm Extreme. Take it easy.